It began under the golden light of Rome, the kind of light that feels as if heaven itself leans closer, watching. The air in St. Peter's Square still carried the echoes of that historic May morning, when Pope Leo XIV was crowned the 267th Pontiff, and Cardinal Luis Antonio Tagle placed the ring of the fisherman upon his hand. Millions witnessed it, but no one knew the deeper story that was about to unfold in early August 2025. The Jubilee of the Youth had filled the streets of Rome with song, prayer, and tears of devotion. Cardinal Tagle stood before a sea of young faces, speaking of faith, choices, and the courage to follow Christ in a world that seems to be forgetting him. Yet, there was something else, something unspoken in his eyes that day. Though he carried a secret too great to tell, that secret followed him to a quiet side chapel inside the basilica. The pilgrims had gone. The choir's last note had faded, and only the flicker of candles danced across marble and shadow. There, in the dim light, stood a centuries-old statue of the Blessed Mother. Its eyes, carved from a stone so ancient, had witnessed popes rise and fall, wars rage, and empires crumble. He approached, slowly, reverently, each step echoing against the silence. His hand trembled not from fear, but from something deeper. A pull, as if the statue itself was calling him. He reached out, his fingers brushing the cold, unyielding cheek of Our Lady. And then it happened. The eyes opened not in a flash, not in some loud theatrical miracle, but in a slow, almost human awakening. Stone gave way to life. The dark irises gleamed as if wet with tears. They locked onto his, unblinking, filled with a sorrow and urgency that pierced straight through his soul. And in that moment, he felt it. A voice not of this world rushed into his heart. It spoke of trials to come, of a church tested beyond imagining, of Pope Leo XIV standing at the threshold of decisions that would shake heaven and earth. It spoke of the great ones returning, and of a moment when faith would be the only light left in the darkness. Cardinal Tagle staggered back, breathless, but he could not look away. The eyes of the Blessed Mother followed him, pleading, warning, commanding him to remember, and somewhere deep within the Vatican, as if on cue, the bells began to toll. The bells echoed through the ancient walls, deep, solemn, each one like the heartbeat of the church itself. Cardinal Tagle stood, frozen, still staring into those living eyes, as if the Mother of God had chosen this moment, this man, for something far greater than himself. Somewhere beyond the chapel, the Vatican was alive with whispers, the papal guards shifting in uneasy formation, the sound of hurried footsteps on marble, and from the Apostolic Palace, a light in Pope Leo XIV's private window flickered against the night. Tagle's mind he thought of the conclave, of the moment he placed the ring of the fisherman on the hand of a man chosen not only by cardinals, but by Providence. He remembered the silent vow he made in that instant to defend the bride of Christ, no matter the cost. And now, in this dim chapel, that vow was being tested. The voice in his heart grew stronger. It spoke of wolves in crimson robes, of secret factions hidden even among the faithful, of alliances forged in shadows, deals signed not with ink, but with souls. It told of documents locked deep beneath the Vatican archives, sealed not to protect history, but to hide it from the faithful. He felt the weight of centuries pressing upon him. This was no vision meant for comfort. This was a warning. Far away, thunder rolled over the city, and with it, he could almost hear the clash of unseen armies, the armies of heaven and the forces of hell gathering for a battle that had already begun. The air itself felt charged, as if the veil between the seen and the unseen had thinned to a fragile thread. Suddenly, the great bronze doors at the end of the chapel burst open. A young priest, breathless, pale, ran toward him. "Eminence, the Holy Father, he is calling for you, immediately." Tagle turned back to the statue. The eyes were closing again. But before they shut completely, a single tear fell warm, real onto the stone robe. He caught it in his hand. It burned against his skin, not with pain, but with an unexplainable, holy fire. He didn't need to be told twice. Whatever awaited him in the apostolic palace was connected to this moment. The corridors seemed longer than ever. The paintings of saints and martyrs looked down upon him, their faces caught between sorrow and fierce resolve. Guards opened door after door until he reached the Pope's private study. There sat Pope Leo XIV, his eyes grave, his hands clasped, the fisherman's ring glinting under the lamplight. "Luis," he said quietly, "something has happened, and it cannot leave these walls." And in that instant, Tagle knew. The purification of the Church had begun. The question was, would they survive it? Pope Leo XIV leaned forward, the shadows of the Vatican night framing his face, the weight of Peter's throne heavy in his eyes. "Luis, tonight I have seen things no pope should see, yet every pope fears." His voice trembled not with weakness, but with the awful certainty of a man who has glimpsed the battlefield between heaven and hell. On the desk before him lay a sealed parchment, the wax unbroken, the seal unmistakable, Our Lady of Fatima. Tagle's heart pounded. This was no ordinary message. This was part of the third secret, the part no one had spoken of since the day Sister Lucia left it in the hands of the holy. "See, the enemies of the Church are not only outside these walls," the Pope said, his voice tightening. "They are here, wearing the same robes we do, speaking the same prayers we do. But their hearts—" He looked away, as if the truth itself might burn the air. "Their hearts are not for Christ." Tagle's mind flashed back to the statue. The eyes, the tear. Was this the reason? Was the Blessed Mother warning him for this? Outside, a sudden wind swept across the Vatican gardens, the ancient cypress trees groaning under its force. Somewhere, deep within the apostolic palace, the lights flickered as if even the electricity could feel the encroaching darkness. "There will be a schism," Pope Leo continued. "Not in years, not in decades, but in days. A choice will come for every cardinal, every bishop, every priest, to stand with Christ and his bride, or to bow to the spirit of the world." Tagle felt it then, the weight of prophecy pressing on his chest. He had read about the visions of saints, the smoke of Satan entering the sanctuary, the bride of Christ stripped and mocked, the shepherd struck so the flock may scatter. But now he was living it. Suddenly, 3 sharp knocks on the door, not the careful tap of protocol, but the urgent pounding of fear. The Swiss guard stepped in, helmet under his arm. "Your Holiness, it's happened again." The statue in the courtyard, its eyes, they opened. The Pope rose slowly, each movement deliberate, as though he were stepping into prophecy itself. "Luis, this is the sign. The time has come." And then, as if heaven wished to stamp the moment, the bells of St. Peter's began to toll again, not for a funeral, not for a mass, but for a warning to the faithful across the world, that the purification of the Church had begun, and nothing could stop it. The doors to the Pope's private chamber swung open, and in stepped 3 of the most senior cardinals in the Church, men Tagle had prayed with, worked beside, and, in some cases, quietly distrusted. Their crimson robes swayed like waves of blood under the lamplight, their faces solemn, but their eyes unreadable. Pope Leo XIV did not invite them to sit. He stood, the fisherman's ring gleaming, like a seal of eternal authority. "Brothers," he began, his voice cutting through the room like a blade, "the bride of Christ is under siege, not by the armies of men, but by the powers of darkness themselves." One of the cardinals shifted uneasily, his hands clasping his pectoral cross too tightly as if the metal itself burned. Another met Tagle's gaze with an expression that was almost defiant. The Holy Father continued, "Statues of Our Lady across Rome have opened their eyes. Some have wept. Some have moved. These are not rumors. I have seen them myself, Athena. And tonight, the Mother of God has spoken through tears to my brother here, Cardinal Tagle." Tagle felt the weight of the moment pressing down, as if every angel in heaven was watching his next breath. Her eyes were alive. "Her tear burned like fire in my hand," he said, his voice steady but charged with awe. "She spoke of betrayal from within, of shepherds who no longer know the voice of the true shepherd, of wolves wearing the garments of the apostles." Low murmur rippled through the room. The oldest cardinal stepped forward, his voice like cold steel. "Your Holiness, we must be careful. Apparitions are dangerous. They can divide the faithful. Perhaps it is best this remains." The Pope's eyes flared not with anger, but with the righteous fire of a man who knows silence would mean death to the soul. Private, when the Church is bleeding, when the bride of Christ is being stripped before the nations. No eminence. The time for secrecy is over. And then, as if the very walls of the apostolic palace wished to bear witness, the lights flickered again. A sudden crash echoed from the courtyard below. Guards shouted, boots striking stone. They rushed to the balcony. Below, in the Vatican courtyard, pilgrims stood frozen, pointing upward. The great bronze statue of St. Peter, towering, immovable for centuries, was no longer holding just the keys. In his other hand, there was now a sword. Glinting in the moonlight, no sculptor had placed it there. No human hand had lifted it. And yet, there it was. A sign, a warning, a call to arms not of flesh and blood, but of prayer, fasting, truth, and courage. Pope Leo's voice broke the stunned silence. The purification has begun, and heaven is telling us there will be no compromise. We either fight or we fall. Tagle looked at the glowing sword, and in the depths of his soul, he knew. The battle for the soul of the Catholic Church had just entered its most dangerous hour. Asterisk. The tension in the war room was suffocating. Every eye fixed, every breath measured, as if the walls themselves were listening. Pope Leo XIV's words still hung in the air like the ringing after a thunderclap sharp. Undeniable, impossible to forget. And then it happened. A figure at the far end of the table, one of the most powerful cardinals in Rome, lowly rose to his feet. His voice was calm, almost rehearsed, but beneath the velvet tone lurked something darker. "Your Holiness, for the good of the Church, for the preservation of unity, we ask you to step down." The air went cold. Tagle felt the blood drain from his face. Around the table, a few cardinals shifted their eyes away, but others nodded ever so slightly, like conspirators signaling a final move in a long-hidden game. Pope Leo's jaw tightened, but he did not sit. "And who will take my place? One who bends to the spirit of the world. One who trades the keys of the kingdom for the applause of men." The lead conspirator did not flinch. "The chair of Peter is too precious to be risked on visions, on dreams, on dangerous prophecies." Dangerous prophecies. The words echoed through the chamber like a curse. Tagle's fists clenched under the table. He knew these men, had shared bread with them, prayed with them. Yet now he could see the wolf's teeth beneath the wool. The Pope took a step forward, his voice rising with the weight of eternity. It is not I you are rejecting. It is Christ himself. It is the bride you swore to protect. You think heaven's signs are dangerous? The true danger is your silence. Then, before the lead conspirator could reply, the lights in the room burst one by one, casting the chamber into darkness. Only the crucifix above the Pope's head remained lit, but not by candlelight. It was glowing radiant, alive, its bronze form shining as if molten with divine fire. The head of Christ slowly turned, his eyes piercing, sorrowful, and impossibly alive, locked on the very cardinal who had spoken the words of removal. The man stumbled backward, his face pale, his lips trembling. Around him, several others fell to their knees without knowing why. A few fled the room entirely, and then the sound returned, the same unearthly trumpet call that had shaken the Vatican moments before. But now, it was louder, closer. It felt as if the sound was coming from inside their very souls. Pope Leo did not move. His gaze swept the room, his voice low, steady, unshakable. The bride of Christ will be cleansed, not by your decrees, but by his judgment. Tagle could feel that this was no longer politics. This was war in its purest form. Heaven had made its move, and the forces of darkness had been caught in the light. The question was, what would they do next? The Vatican war room still trembled with the echo of the trumpet call. But outside, another sound was rising. Not the solemn toll of bells, not the murmur of prayer, but the unmistakable swell of thousands of voices gasping in unison. A guard burst through the doors, breathless, armor clinking. Your Holiness, Cardinal Tagle, you must see this. They hurried down the marble corridor, the sound of their steps drowned by the gathering roar outside. As they emerged into St. Peter's Square, the night air hit them cool, charged, almost electric. And there, before the eyes of the world, it was happening. The massive bronze statue of St. Peter, standing for centuries with the keys of the kingdom in one hand and the word of God in the other, now held that gleaming sword still. But the sword was no longer bronze. It burned with a light so pure, so white, that it seemed to cut the darkness itself. And then, it moved. Before the eyes of tens of thousands, the statue's head lifted toward heaven. Its lips did not part, but the trumpet call that had shaken the Vatican now thundered from the very air around it. Pilgrims fell to their knees, weeping. Tourists who had come for photos found themselves making the sign of the cross without knowing why. Above them, the clouds themselves began to shift, spiraling in a pattern no storm had ever made. And in that swirling light, a figure took form, not sharp, but radiant, unmistakable. The outline of the Blessed Mother, her mantle billowing in an unseen wind. Her hands extended over the city as if to shield it from what was coming. Cardinal Tagle felt his knees give way. The same burning presence that had poured into him in the chapel now washed over the entire square. And in that wave came the voice, not in the ears, but in the heart. My children, the hour has come. The bride of Christ will be purified. The shepherds sifted, the faithful tested as never before. Stand with my son, or be swept away. Gasps, cries. The square was no longer a crowd. It was a battlefield of souls making their choice in real time. Pope Leo XIV stepped forward onto the balcony, his voice carrying with a strength no microphone could match. People of God, heaven has spoken. The time for silence is over. The time for fear is over. The time for compromise is over. We are the bride of Christ. Then we will not bow to the spirit of the world. Stand and be counted. A shout rose from the square row, united like a single heartbeat. And then, as if to seal the moment for eternity, the sword in St. Peter's hand lifted skyward on its own, blazing brighter than the sun. For a heartbeat, night turned to day. Shadows fled. Every window, every rooftop, every corner of the Vatican bathed in that light. And when it faded, the sword was gone. Only the keys remained. The meaning was clear. The war had begun, but the victory belonged to Christ, and somewhere deep in the crowd, unseen by the faithful, a group of shadowed figures turned and slipped away into the night, knowing their time was running out. This was the beginning of the purification. This was the moment heaven declared. Nought.